Anthony Bourdain has several blog posts where he referred to Alice Waters as Saint Alice. And he would say stuff like, oh, we got a blissed out Saint Alice burning up 2 cords of wood to fry an egg. Hey friends, I wanted to talk a little more about that last episode of With Love Megan with Alice Waters. Now, if you saw my other video about this episode, you'll know that I was trying to start this when I got completely distracted with the egg gathering scene and the realization of the fact that she sent someone out to wash the eggs before they gather them. So aside from that, I found the Alice Waters episode disappointing because Alice Waters is actually an interesting character. There are a ton of things that Megan could have asked her that would have made the show really fascinating, and she just chose not to. Now, I think that the reason why she chose not to is related to the reason why they always choose to say everything completely bland. They're scared of any backlash. The backlash is going to come at their platform level, and they don't do themselves any favors by constantly creating these projects that evolve around authenticity. Authenticity is the sell, and then they don't act authentic. This was touched on in that Vanity Fair article. They said that sometimes Harry and Meghan would have good ideas and then back off of them because they'd be like, oh, they might make the queen mad. We might have to move again. What will everybody say? Like, apparently Meghan on the episode entitled The B Word, or I don't remember if it was even titled that, but that's the way that she would refer to it. Apparently she was all on board. She was going to say bitch, like, no problem. And then at the last minute, changed it all up and froze, like, no, it has to be the B word. Anyway, I digress. I feel like that's kind of what happened with the Alice Waters episode too, likely. And then there's also the fact that we all who follow the Meghan controversies know that Meghan tried to be a partner of Flamingo Estates before she created American Riviera Orchard, apparently without Googling anything about whether or not that name would work. And Alice Waters apparently did work with Flamingo Estates. Flamingo Estates have books that they've released, and one of them is a book by Alice Waters. It was spotted on a shelf behind Prince Harry in one of his, I don't know, many videos that he puts out for this and that. One of the juicier known or rumored tidbits about Alice Waters is that she had an affair with a gay man. Apparently he was, fully out and open gay, and she was able to seduce him into an affair. Now, it's also rumored that she might have stolen his recipes. That is completely alleged and unfounded. I don't know nothing about that. Just talking, y'all. One of the things that bugged me about most of Meghan's cooking on this show is that it all looked so boring and lacking of flavor. It was often very, very aesthetically pleasingly arranged. And sometimes, like with the rainbows and the ladybug deals, she managed to have color and it wasn't all beige. But I'm not personally a big fan of Alice Waters' type of cooking. I am a fan of organic and farm to table. That is important. That's a big thing. But Alice Waters' whole shtick, her whole thing is let the natural flavor of the food come out. Don't do too much. Just, elevate it a little. I like flavor in my food, and flavor is not inherently unhealthy. I feel like a lot of people who took up Alice Waters' narrative have begun to believe that seasoned food has bad things in it. Seasonings are herbs. They're plants. They're dried ground plants that are ground. And, seasoning blends are those usually with salt mixed in. You can get them without salt too, but I don't understand what the problem is with seasoning. And to me, part of the magic of cooking is blending flavors. You stew this down really slow, like the onions or whatever, and then the garlic, it becomes like kind of a binder to the stew. In Cajun cooking, you've got the Holy Trinity and the Pope. The Holy Trinity is onions, bell peppers, celery, and the Pope is garlic. And, those make everything taste better. In most cultural cooking, flavor and seasoning is a massive, massive thing. And almost everything that Meghan cooked, not only are her vegetables just, wilted, nothing's actually cooked in a specific way to bring out the flavor. Nothing's hardly seasoning. There's not a lot of talk about spice, except for when the Korean chef was in there and showed her how to make Korean chicken. There was some spice involved then. But in Pamela Anderson's show, for instance, for one thing, there's a theme to it. Pamela Anderson is vegan, and so she's learning how to make all these delicious recipes vegan. She has a Haitian chef in there, and he's showing her amazing spices. They did this stew. The eggplant for the stew was slow cooked down that made it just really thick, and like they made a pepper sauce to go over it, and all kinds of just really interesting things, and learning about the cultural aspects at the same time. You just didn't get that with anything on Megan's show, other than, like I said, a little bit with a Korean chef, a little bit from the clips I saw with the Argentinian lady, although it seemed like when Megan was talking to her that most of it was focused on the fact that Megan's so Argentinian herself from spending time there. As per usual, it needs to be all about Megan. Okay, so before I go into Anthony Bourdain's thoughts on Alice Waters, I gotta ask, does any of you recognize this? The TV dinner. It's evolved over the years into something a little better, but the frozen dinner actually first began in the 50s. And so at the time, whenever Alice Waters first began her farm to table organic food movement, it was valid, relevant, and needed because in the 50s, after TV dinners, frozen dinners, and stuff like that became more plentiful after the Depression, the farm to table and organic quality of food was kind of lost on the population as a whole for a while. And the reasons for that were very normal. It wasn't, in my opinion, it wasn't a big conspiracy or anything like that. It was just that during the Depression, people were freaking hungry. There was a dust bowl and all kinds of stuff. It was hard to even grow anything to live off the land. And if you had money, there wasn't always food in stores to even buy it with. And a lot of people didn't have money to even have that option. So once you got to the 50s, there's not a war going on. Things are much more prosperous, and TV dinners and pre-manufactured food came out. It was a wonderful thing to the people because they had most of them had experienced starvation in the 30s. So this was a good thing. But in the 70s, when Alice started her movement, it was also a good thing to remind people of eating fresh food, farm to table, back to the land type movement. I completely give her credit for it. However, I do feel like, as with anything, people can go a bit off the rails with their movement. So let me show you Anthony Bourdain, rest in peace. Let me show you his criticism of Alice Waters. So Anthony Bourdain has several blog posts where he referred to Alice Waters as Saint Alice. And he would say stuff like, oh, we got a blissed out Saint Alice burning up 2 cords of wood to fry an egg. His criticism of her was that he felt like some of her methods were often much more wasteful and unrealistic for the average person, while she was preaching so hard that if you didn't eat organic food, that you were basically poisoning yourself and you're going to die. There was a little bit of that in Megan's show too, because there was at one point where Megan mentioned something to Alice about organic food, and Megan said something like, I know it can be more expensive, and Alice was like, yes, it can, and Megan's like, but it's so worth it in the end, overall or over time. The implication was, if you don't eat organic food, you're going to get sick. And while those arguments can be made, and especially there are times if you have certain conditions, illnesses that you really, really need to focus on organic food, it's important that people who don't have a lot of money don't feel like there's no point in buying fresh vegetables if they can't afford the organic, the heirloom, this and that. No, it's still good to just eat the vegetables and eat them fresh, eat them frozen, eat them out of cans. Like, they're still healthy, even if they're not in the absolute healthiest condition. They're still healthy. Anyway, my little rant there. I couldn't find the original post that Anthony was replying to, but he had made yet another rant about Alice Waters in 2009, and people were asking him about it and calling him out about it, to the point where he started feeling a little bad. Well, Anthony Bourdain, he was the same. I wish he was still around. Here's what he said in reply. He said, I don't have any burning issue with Alice Waters, a restaurateur and visionary whose accomplishments clearly dwarf my own. So I doubt it. In a perfect candy-colored world, I'd like to eat most of what she'd like to see us eat. I feed my daughter mostly organic food whenever possible, and greatly admire what Dan Barber is doing. My comments were a heartfelt reaction to her hubristic letter to the then president-elect, a document whose tone, timing, and content I found distasteful, particularly coming from someone who hadn't even bothered to vote in the 4 previous elections. True, I am suspicious of wealthy suburbanites who preach back to the soil philosophies, as if most, or even many, could start digging subsistence gardens in their backyard or afford expensive organic or locavore lifestyles. But Chez Panisse was inarguably a cradle of the food revolution. I respect Alice Waters' enormous contribution to changing the way we eat and cook today. No one can take that away from her. No one should try. I intend to treat her with the respect she rightly deserves. She says some stupid shit sometimes, and she is certainly free to call bullshit on me when I do the same. I might, in the spirit of good fun, point out that following even my own not particularly distinguished career in kitchens, most of it in view of the choking victim sign, I do at least know the Heimlich maneuver. I don't know what he was referring to there, y'all. I probably need to look that up because it sounds like it might be a funny thing. Oh, look, here is the original. Okay, here's what he said that he was responding to. Alice Waters annoys the living shit out of me. We're all in the middle of a recession, like we're going to start buying expensive organic food and running to the green market. There's something very Khmer Rogue. I don't know if I pronounced that first word right, about Alice Waters that has become unrealistic. I'm suspicious of orthodoxy, the kind of orthodoxy when it comes to what you put in your mouth. Again, I agree with them. However, everything in moderation and balance. If you go too far with what Anthony Bourdain was saying, don't be orthodoxy about what you put in your mouth, you end up like some of those influencers on TikTok that will eat a whole cake at one time and sit there and be like, your body doesn't know the difference between a cake and a vegetable. I'm all for eating a whole cake anytime anyone feels like it. I've done it. I might do it later. But still, I'm not going to pretend like there is no nutritional difference between a cake and a vegetable. Like that's just crazy, y'all. So anyway, going back to the original point, yeah, Alice Waters kind of has the same Meghan Markle preachy tone that first got Meghan and Harry in real trouble, like I've talked about before. It was really when they made that big statement about carbon emissions, a whole speech, I believe it was at a climate summit or something like that, and took a private jet there and back or on their private travels all around at their friend's place, like big Russian private jets, gas guzzlers. And whenever they were called on it, their response was, "Oh, well, we have to because of our position. Rules for thee, not for me. I'm telling you what you need to do to save the world. I can't because I'm a prince. We're royalty." So, yeah, that did not go over well. And that's what really started the avalanche of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle heavy, heavy criticism in the media. They want to call it other things. It was just heavy criticism, in my opinion. There are always the rogue, actual hate content, but the majority of the British press content that Meghan complained about was just the British press, British pressing. That's what they do. Ours does it too. So anyway, this video was mainly more of just kind of a rant about what I didn't like about Alice Waters on there and how Meghan could have really asked her more interesting questions. There's one part where Alice says that her mother wasn't a good cook, like there was nothing that she knew how to do, and that was one of the things that inspired her. And Meghan was like, well, what was your favorite thing that she did cook? It's like the woman just told you that her mother was a bad cook. It's kind of like whenever the Korean chef said that he likes to listen to speed metal, and she's like, "Well, that's not the joy of cooking." And when Mindy Kaling said, "Oh, people would be so shocked to know that Meghan Markle eats Jack in the Box. You know, I'm Sussex now." And honestly, nobody's shocked that Meghan Markle eats Jack in the Box. She was a middle-class girl from California. Like, what? There's nothing shocking about that. She did not grow up aristocratic. And it's really annoying to me when Americans fawn over her like she's always been a duchess. What is up with that? Like, y'all, like, really? Okay, well, I'm gonna end the ranting now. I hope y'all enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments. Have a good day.